There is a primal, instinctual fear hardwired into the human brain. It is the fear of the breached perimeter. For thousands of years, we have built walls to keep the predators out. We build houses, we install heavy steel doors, we buy high-tech security systems, and we convince ourselves that we have mastered our environment. We tell ourselves that when we turn the key and hear the heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding into place, the dangers of the outside world simply cease to exist. But walls and locks are only effective if you are the only one holding the key. The terrifying reality of an intruder isn't just the threat of physical harm or the loss of property. It is the profound, lingering psychological violation. It is the realization that a stranger, someone with entirely unknown intentions, has bypassed your defenses, invaded your most private space, and watched you where you were supposed to be completely unseen. Tonight, I have 3 true stories from people who experienced this ultimate violation. People who woke up to the horrifying reality that the call was, quite literally, coming from inside the house. Settle in, look over your shoulder one last time, and listen. Story 1, the attic access. This happened about 6 years ago, shortly after my divorce. I was 32 and had just moved out of the apartment I shared with my ex-husband and bought a house of my own. It was a fixer-upper in a quiet, older neighborhood. The house had character hardwood floors, crown molding, and a massive, unfinished attic. But it also had the quirks of a house built in the 1940s. It was drafty, the floorboards creaked violently if you stepped on them wrong, and the layout was a bit maze-like. I lived alone with my cat, a heavy-set orange tabby named Barnaby. Barnaby was a lazy cat. He spent 90% of his day sleeping in a patch of sunlight on the living room rug. He was not a hunter, and he certainly wasn't easily spooked. About a month after I moved in, things started feeling off. Started small, microscopic almost. I would buy a loaf of bread, make 2 sandwiches over the weekend, and by Wednesday the bag would be nearly empty. I'd buy a brand new carton of milk, and it would feel noticeably lighter the next morning. First, I chalked it up to stress. The divorce had been brutal, moving was exhausting, and I was working long hours at a new firm. I figured I was just mindlessly stress-eating and forgetting about it. Then it escalated to objects. I came home from work one Tuesday, set my keys on the small console table by the front door, exactly where I put them every single day, and went to make dinner. The next morning, I was rushing to leave for work, and the keys were gone. I tore the house apart. I finally found them an hour later, sitting on the edge of the bathtub in the master bathroom. I had absolutely no memory of going into the bathroom when I got home, let alone bringing my keys in there. I convinced myself I was losing my mind. I even made an appointment with my doctor, thinking I might be suffering from early onset memory issues or severe sleepwalking. But then Barnaby started acting strange. Like I said, Barnaby was lazy. But around the second month in the house, he started staring at the ceilings. I would be sitting on the couch reading, and I'd look over to see him sitting bolt upright, his tail twitching, his pupils dilated into massive black saucers, staring dead fixed at the large cast iron air return vent set high up in the living room wall. Sometimes he would follow something invisible across the ceiling. He would slowly walk from the living room, down the hallway, tracking a sound that I couldn't hear. The breaking point happened on a long weekend in November. It was a Saturday night. I had stayed up late watching movies and went to bed around 2 a.m. I am a notoriously heavy sleeper. Once I'm out, a freight train could drive through my bedroom and I wouldn't budge. I woke up suddenly. The digital clock on my nightstand read 4:13 a.m. The house was dead silent, save for the hum of the central heating unit. I lay there for a moment, wondering what had pulled me out of my deep sleep. Then I heard it. A cough. It was muffled, dry, and came from directly above me. My bedroom was on the second floor, right beneath the unfinished attic. My blood ran cold. I stopped breathing, straining my ears against the silence of the room. Creak. A slow, heavy shift of weight on the wooden joists directly above my bed. It wasn't a mouse. It wasn't a raccoon. Raccoons scurry. This was a slow, deliberate shift of mass. A human being was moving around in my attic. Panic, icy and sharp, flooded my chest. I slowly reached over to my nightstand, my hand shaking uncontrollably, and grabbed my cell phone. I slid out of bed as quietly as humanly possible, grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table, and crept out of the bedroom. The attic access was a pull-down square panel located in the ceiling of the hallway, right between my bedroom and the guest room. As I stepped into the hallway, I looked up at the panel. It was painted white, blending perfectly with the ceiling. But in the dim moonlight filtering through the window at the end of the hall, I saw something that made my stomach violently drop. Right below the panel on the pale yellow wall of the hallway was a dark, muddy scuff mark, the size and shape of the toe of a heavy work boot. Someone had been climbing up into the attic without using the pull-down stairs. They were hoisting themselves up. I didn't turn on any lights. I backed away down the stairs, keeping my eyes locked on that ceiling panel the entire time, clutching the brass lamp like a baseball bat. I didn't stop until I was in my car, parked halfway down the street, locking the doors with shaking hands. I called 911 from the driver's seat. 2 squad cars arrived within 10 minutes. I handed them my spare house key and waited in the street as 4 officers, flashlights drawn, entered my home. The wait felt like an eternity. I watched the beams of their flashlights sweep through the downstairs windows, then move up to the second floor. I saw the light spill into the hallway, and then I heard the loud, heavy creak of the attic panel being pulled down. 15 minutes later, an officer walked out the front door and jogged over to my car. His expression was grim. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," he said softly. He escorted me back into the house and up the stairs. The attic panel was open, the wooden ladder extended down to the hallway floor. "We didn't find anyone," the officer explained, leading me up the ladder. "But you were right to call." I poked my head up into the cavernous, dusty attic space. The air up there was thick and smelled stale. 2 other officers were standing near the far corner, illuminating a section of the floorboards with their heavy tactical flashlights. I climbed up the rest of the way and walked over. Nestled between 2 large storage trunks was a makeshift living space. There was a sleeping bag, heavily soiled and smelling of unwashed bodies. Surrounding it were dozens of empty food wrappers, my bread bags, my missing granola bars, empty water bottles. There was a plastic bucket in the corner that I don't want to describe. And sitting on top of an old, overturned milk crate, neatly arranged, were my missing house keys, a tube of my lipstick, and a pair of my underwear. The officer pointed his flashlight toward the roof. At the far end of the attic, near the gable, was a small, octagonal vent meant for air circulation. The wooden louvers had been systematically broken and removed, creating an opening just large enough for a grown man to squeeze through from the outside. He had climbed the trellis on the side of the house, broken the vent, and moved in. "He's been living up here for a while," the officer said quietly. "Weeks, maybe months." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. While I was reading on the couch, while I was showering, while I was sleeping completely unprotected in my bed just a few feet below him, he was up here, listening, watching. When I left for work, he would drop down from the ceiling. He ate my food. He walked through my house. He moved my keys just to mess with me. He touched my things. They brought in K9 units, but the trail went cold in the woods behind my neighborhood. The man had heard me wake up, or heard the sirens, and squeezed back out the gable vent, disappearing into the night. I never spent another night in that house. I listed it for sale the following Monday and took a massive financial loss just to get rid of it. I live in a high-rise apartment now. No attic, no crawl spaces, but sometimes, when the building settles and the ceiling groans, I find myself staring up at the plaster, holding my breath, waiting for the sound of a cough. Story 2. The distraction at the door. I was 19, a sophomore in college, home for the winter break. My parents had decided to take my younger sister on a ski trip to Colorado for 5 days. But I couldn't go because I was recovering from a pretty severe bout of bronchitis and needed to rest. Our house was in a very affluent, quiet suburb in Ohio. It was the kind of neighborhood where the houses were set far back from the road, separated by thick lines of old oak trees and manicured hedges. felt incredibly safe, almost aggressively mundane. It was a Thursday night, around 11:30 p.m. I was lying on the couch in the basement den. The basement was massive, fully finished, with a home theater setup. I was bundled in blankets, watching a movie with the volume turned up high to drown out the sound of a brutal winter storm outside. The wind was whipping snow against the small basement windows, and the temperature had dropped well below zero. Because the movie was loud, I almost didn't hear it. Ding dong. The chime of the front doorbell barely cut through the cinematic explosions, but it was distinct enough to make me pause the movie. I sat up, coughing a dry, painful cough into my elbow. I looked at my phone. 11:42 p.m. Nobody rings a doorbell in a quiet suburb at nearly midnight during a blizzard unless something is very wrong. I pulled the heavy blanket around my shoulders and walked up the carpeted stairs to the ground floor. The house was pitch black except for the amber glow of the street lamp filtering through the frosted sidelight windows next to the heavy oak front door. I approached the door slowly, my bare feet sinking into the thick entryway rug. I leaned forward and pressed my eye against the peephole. Standing on the front porch, shivering violently in the freezing wind, was a young woman. She looked to be about my age. She was wearing a thin, torn party dress, no coat, and she had mascara running down her cheeks. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, and she was looking frantically over her shoulder toward the dark street. I felt a sudden, massive surge of empathy and alarm. She looked terrified. She looked like she was freezing to death. I reached for the deadbolt to unlock it and let her in. It was a purely instinctual reaction. But right as my fingers touched the cold brass of the lock, a tiny, quiet voice in the back of my head screamed at me to stop. I hesitated. I lived on a long, winding street. There were no college bars nearby, no frat houses. It was miles to the nearest commercial area. How had a girl in a party dress ended up on my porch in the middle of a blizzard without a car in the driveway? I kept the deadbolt locked, but pressed my face close to the heavy wood. "Hello," I called out, my voice thick from sickness. The girl jumped, then pressed her face close to the door. "Please," she sobbed, her voice muffled but distinct. "Please, you have to let me in. My boyfriend, he hit me. He kicked me out of the car. He's looking for me. Please, I'm freezing." She hit the heavy wood of the door with her open palm. Smack. "Please let me in." My heart was pounding. Every human fiber in my body told me to open that door and help a woman in danger. But something felt incredibly wrong. The setup was too perfect. The isolation, the storm, the desperate plea. "I'm going to call the police for you right now," I yelled back through the door. "They'll be here in 5 minutes. You can wait on the porch. I'll turn the heater on out there." We had a patio heater on the covered porch, but it was broken. I just wanted to see her reaction. The crying stopped instantly. The transition was so jarring it made my breath catch. 1 second she was sobbing hysterically, the next dead silence. I pressed my eye back to the peephole. She wasn't shivering anymore. Her posture had completely straightened. She wiped the fake tears from her eyes, glared at the peephole with an expression of pure, cold irritation, and pulled a walkie-talkie from the folds of her thin dress. She brought it to her mouth. "He's not opening it," she said flatly. "Go to the back." She turned around and calmly walked off the porch, disappearing into the swirling snow. My brain short-circuited. Pure, unadulterated terror flooded my system. It was a trap, a distraction. Before I could even reach for my phone in my pocket, the sound of a massive, violent impact echoed from the back of the house. Crash. The sickening sound of shattered glass and splintered wood exploding inward. They had kicked in the sliding glass doors in the kitchen. I was standing in the entryway, totally exposed. The kitchen was just down the hall, and I could already hear the heavy, frantic crunching of boots on the broken glass. I didn't run upstairs. Upstairs was a trap. Upstairs meant cornering myself in a bedroom. I spun around and sprinted back toward the basement door. I flew down the stairs, ignoring the burning in my lungs, and practically threw myself into the dark basement. I didn't go to the den. I went to the unfinished utility room at the far end of the basement, where the furnace and water heater were kept. The room was crammed with old moving boxes, holiday decorations, and piles of discarded winter clothing. I scrambled into the darkest corner, wedged myself tightly between the massive, humming metal furnace and the concrete foundation wall, and pulled a heavy, dusty tarp over my body. I pulled my phone out. 0 bars. The storm had knocked out cell service, or the basement walls were too thick. I couldn't call 911. I was completely alone. I clamped both hands over my mouth, terrified that my bronchitis would force a cough. The furnace roared next to me, but I could still hear them. 10 minutes passed. 10 minutes of absolute destruction taking place directly above my head. The house shook with the violence of their search. Then the footsteps moved from the ground floor to the basement stairs. It started on a Tuesday. I worked typical office hours, leaving the apartment at 8 a.m. and returning around 6 p.m. I walked up to my front door, keys in hand, and slid the key into the top deadbolt. It didn't catch. The lock was already disengaged. I frowned, pulled the key out, and tried the bottom lock. It turned smoothly, unlocking the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, completely confused. I am meticulous about locking my doors. It's muscle memory. I never leave without turning both deadbolts. But the top one had been unlocked. I pushed the door open cautiously. "Hello," I called out. Silence. I walked through the apartment, checking the closets, the bathroom, under the bed. The place was empty. Everything was exactly as I had left it. My laptop was still on the desk. My watch was on the nightstand. Nothing was stolen. I convinced myself that I must have just been distracted that morning. Rushing to catch the train, I had only locked the bottom deadbolt. It was a stupid mistake, but human. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, both deadbolts were locked, but when I walked into the kitchen, the heavy iron security bar on the back window, a window that faced a narrow, dark alleyway, was unlatched and hanging open. My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. You cannot unlatch that bar from the outside. You have to be inside the apartment to pull the heavy metal pin out. Someone had been in my apartment. I called my landlord immediately. He was dismissive, claiming maintenance must have been in to check a pipe or something and forgot to latch it, though he had no record of a work order. I demanded that the locks be changed. He agreed, but said the locksmith couldn't come until Monday. The figure turned, bolted out of the bedroom, sprinted down the short hallway, and I heard the heavy front door tear open and slam shut. I didn't follow. I stayed pressed against the headboard in the pitch black, shaking so violently the entire bed frame rattled, until the sun came up. When the police arrived, they found the wedge alarm for my bedroom door sitting uselessly on the hallway floor. The intruder had used a thin piece of wire slipped under the door gap to push the alarm out of the way before turning the handle. They checked the security cameras in the building's lobby. The footage showed a man I had never seen before in my life. He didn't pick the lock. He used a key. He casually walked into the building, unlocked my door, and let himself in. The police investigation later revealed the terrifying truth. 6 months prior, I had hired a dog walking service for 2 weeks while I was working long hours on a project. The company was legitimate, but one of the walkers they employed had a criminal record they had failed to properly vet.